If you're a loyal listener of ours and you just download these things even if you haven't seen the movie, then I need to assure you that this episode won't be about blue X-Men or fishing bait. Nope, there are no superheroes or worms in this motion picture, although the main character certainly is a slug of a human being who works at night. Hey, I'm getting a little offended over here because that's what I do. I work at night, although I don't get to boss Riz Ahmed around. Well, Riz's weird boss is making a nice living by the end of Nightcrawler, so do you know what all his skullduggery would allow him to do? There's a good word, skullduggery. Buy gourmet coffee from Sparkplug. He may be a Los Angelino, well, they all are, but he and his fellow Americans can indeed, they and their fellow Americans, can indeed order Sparkplug coffee just as well as my fellow Canadians can. People in both countries will get orders sent within a week, and listen up, Canadians, you won't be charged for shipping and handling. And in that order bag will be the freshest, fairly traded, premium Arabica beans you're going to rustle up in Canada. Choose half calf or decaf if you prefer either of those types, and order whatever type of caffeination you want from their wide assortment of blends and roasts. Seasonal blends also rotate throughout the year. A smoky fall blend sounds perfect these days, doesn't it? Now I have a way you can take advantage of perks and supremely good deals and also save money every time you order, and that's to become a member of Sparkplug's Autopilot Coffee Club. You also have the option to get orders specifically when you need more beans, not just whenever they fire them onto your porch. This is not even close to a crappy Coffee of the Month club. Sparkplug.coffee/HYES is your typing destination. Our HYES discount code saves you 20% the next time you order, but that's a one-time thing. Sparkplug.coffee, you creatures of the night. Well, it seems like it's time for us to express our thoughts about this film. We need music first, though. Bev, please ask him to give us some.
And action! Have you ever seen
Nightcrawler? Hello, stringers, and thank you from one end of Los Angeles to the other for downloading or streaming the 613th podcast here on Have You Ever Seen? We look back at classic movies to see what we think about them after some time has passed, and we spoil the film in question, so know that now. I'm the unblinking member of the media who doesn't even have 1/10 of the ambition that greasy-haired Lou does in Nightcrawler, Ryan Ellis. And here's the other member of the media sitting at this table right now, that upstanding editor of a talk show, my wife Bev.
That's me.
No scandal with you, although I do work in news.
I do sleep with the contractor that gets us our best B-roll footage.
You probably should. Good idea. Neither of us is a stringer, though, which I guess just means you work freelance. They said that a lot in the movie, and I had to look it up just before we started recording.
Oh, okay, yeah. You specifically work the vampire shift at a 24-hour news station.
Yep.
You'll say it's quite quieter than the news station in this
Well,
movie,
what I do, yeah.
Yeah.
This is also local news, and he's going to a bit of a scummy station.
But the fact that they seem to have a skeleton crew, but at least a crew, where you work, there's hours of the night where there's nobody there but you.
Because the CBC cut back on so much of that stuff, at least in the big building. Maybe in the local affiliates, I don't know, it could be different. And this is also Los Angeles, and it was 10 years ago.
Yeah.
A lot has changed in 10 years in the media. All right, the coming attractions opinion question for Nightcrawler. Jake Gyllenhaal has been in many terrific movies, but I have a bit of an unusual question about his filmography. Which is your favorite of all the films with a one-word title that he's made? One word. And he's been in more than 15 one-word titles, such as Nightcrawler, Enemy, Prisoners, and many others. What's your favorite?
I know this is going to sound like recency bias, but I really thought about it. It really is Nightcrawler.
Okay, I agree with that. I think it's number one.
Oh, yeah? I would have thought you would have picked Zodiac.
Zodiac, I'd say, is probably second best. Great film. Prisoners.
Prisoners is great, yeah.
I know Denis Villeneuve is so beloved these days for Dune, and maybe not so much for Blade Runner 2049, because we liked it, but no one really saw it, and... What was the other one?
Arrival.
Right, that was
really
big,
popular.
I think a hit, but also very awards recognized. But Prisoners, I saw it again maybe a year or two ago. That's not fun, but that's a very good movie. And also, back to Gyllenhaal specifically, don't sleep on Brothers.
Oh, I haven't seen it. When I was looking up all of his one-word name movies, I saw Brothers. I was like, God, I meant to see that. I love the cast.
He's Tobey Maguire's brother. Natalie Portman is Tobey Maguire's wife. Toby was in one of the wars, I forget which one, Afghanistan or Iraq. Comes back and is messed up, and he's so intense in that movie. Gyllenhaal and Portman are good, but Maguire's fantastic. So we'll have to watch that. All right, If It Bleeds, It Leads was first shown at the Toronto International Film Festival in September 2014. Then it was released a decade ago on Halloween of 2014. And we posted this basically a month before Halloween, so we're leading into Scary Movie Month. Not a scary movie, but it is definitely got some horror in it in some ways. This did quite well. The budget was only 9 million simoleons, and it grossed close to $50 million worldwide. But Bev the Worm is 10 years old, and he has not turned. Let's hear what he's all about. And to do that, you should give us the skinny on Nightcrawler.
Well, Jake Gyllenhaal is Lewis. Louis. A stringer who spends his nights chasing a police scanner to crime scenes and car wrecks, gathering footage to sell to a news station. Lewis thinks of little but his goals to turn his job into a thriving business, and his ambitions have him taking bigger and bigger chances to get the shots he knows he can leverage for money and access. And he is unburdened by scruples. When Lewis catches a pair of shooters leaving a triple homicide on camera, instead of turning the footage over to the detective on the case, he uses it to set up a showdown between the cops and the gangsters, just so he can get the whole thing on tape. Oh, and he sets up his employee Rick to get shot, so that he doesn't have to split the proceeds with him.
You took away my bargaining power. That's what he said.
Yeah. Which I think even more than splitting the money, which I'm sure was not nothing to him, is because he was essentially using the leverage of saying, I know you're massively breaking the law. You would spend the rest of your life in jail if somebody caught on to what he was up to.
Rick is saying that.
Rick is saying that in order to get half. And it's more that he was, using that leverage, although I'm not sure what Lewis expected from an employee he's paying $75 a day. Just got a raise to $75
an hour earlier,
a day. Yeah. How loyal he expects him to be.
Well, he was loyal for a couple months on $30.
I know.
And Lou, you said Lewis, but really, apparently he says Lewis to Rick. We do hear him say that when they first meet. And
he corrects him because Rick calls him Lou, and
he says Lewis. But he says Lou to the people in authority like cops because he wants to seem more friendly to them, which is ironic. Usually it'd be, not that Rick's ever a friend, but friends like you can call me Lou, but official people got to call me Lewis. So it's actually backwards from what I would have expected, but I can see why Dan Gilroy, the writer-director, thought of going that way with this.
It's also something that changes about him as the film goes on. It's not just that he lets people start calling him Lou and then he eventually starts introducing himself as Lou. It's that initially Rick introduces himself as Rick and he's like, but it's Richard, right? And he calls him Richard, but then in the second half of the film he's calling him Rick.
It's true.
He drops the formality, and the formality is so much of what makes him
Except he's
an
always
alien in a human
talking
suit.
so formal. It's part of the humor. This is an intense movie. It's not scary, I guess, but it's actually quite a fun movie considering its subject matter, but it's also very funny a lot of the time because Gyllenhaal talks basically like a robot, talking about his goals and all these things. It's such a good performance. All right, the nutshell. So the nutshell for Nightcrawler. I'm fairly certain I'm allowed to film this. He says that the first time he has a camera, first night on the job for him. I think it epitomizes what he and the other stringers do, including Joe Loader, the Bill Paxton character. They're legally allowed to be on the street and record even grisly car wrecks. Cops can't tell them, you can't film this when they're on the street. I don't think there's anything the cops can actually literally do. They do a lot. We see it in reality. Look at the cops that talked about during the George Floyd thing. Stop recording us.
Oh, yeah.
You're on the street. They can do whatever they want to.
They would love for it to be illegal for people to film them, of course.
But there's a morality of this, and he goes way over the legal line in this movie, the way that we don't see Paxton's character do. Maybe Paxton does sometimes, but in this movie, he morally is a lot higher up on the scale than Lou is, who does so many wrong things right away. Going into people's houses when he shouldn't be. And that drive-by thing, that couple, everyone was fine, but he shouldn't have gone into that house. Moving that, I guess it's dead body to get a better shot. All right, the numbers on Nightcrawler, of course, there's no AFI stuff. It's too recent for that. But the critics loved it. 95% of critics, or they have been loving it. I'm sure there have been fresh reviews written in the last 10 years. 266 fresh, 266. Only 14 rotten. The average is 8.3 to 10, and 86% of audiences. Those are the best numbers for anything Dan Gilroy has written or directed. He's only directed 3 films. And those are the best for Gyllenhaal, too, as an actor. Something he produced is higher ranked than this, but this is the highest for him as an actor. This movie was 89th at the 2014 U.S. box office. Gone Girl was 18th. We covered that quite a few months ago. Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat. Covered that this year, too. That was 33rd. And Under the Skin, we just released that just last week, was 173rd.
I was saying when we were watching Nightcrawler that I think there's kind of a parallel between Under the Skin and Nightcrawler, that they could be companion films in a way because they're both about these totally soulless monsters that appear to be simply playing a human rather than being human.
Yeah, true.
They go in vastly different directions, but especially like the first act of both films is introducing a character who is completely unscrupulous.
Another great example in the history of film where, because we're spending so much time with this one character, in a lot of ways, maybe not every way, we cast our lot with them. It's a Taxi Driver, Godfather, Pulp Fiction thing. We should hate these people, but, well, maybe I hate Lou more than those guys.
Yeah, the movie does not want you to ever really identify with Lou. The movie takes great pains to persistently remind you, we're not rooting for this guy. He's a bad person. The first scene where you're introduced to him, he's stealing scrap metal, and he gets caught by a security guard. He tries to sweet talk him, and then once he realizes he's getting nowhere, he beats him up and he steals his watch. Probably not even a very nice watch. It was the watch of a guy who works security in this place.
The watch looks okay on that guy. It looks so weird on Gyllenhaal
and
because
it doesn't even
it's
fit
falling
him.
off of him.
The movie seems to take pains to make sure that we see that he's always wearing the watch, and I think it's the director's way of reminding us being a stringer, a Nightcrawler, is not what turned him evil. He was evil when we met him. He was a bad guy. Yeah. He did bad things. It's not that this world is corrupting him. It's that he was already corrupted and he has discovered the part of the world where a corrupt person fits in perfectly.
Okay, a few more plaudits for this film. Gilroy's original screenplay was nominated for an Oscar. Birdman won. That's a good choice, but this would have been a great choice too. And Jake Gyllenhaal was up for a ton of awards, but not an Oscar nomination. He's only ever had one ever. Remember what that was for? It was for supporting actor for Brokeback. Yeah.
Ah, okay. I was
Never been up for a lead
Brokeback.
Oscar, and yet he's had so many good movies in his career. I think we've only ever covered 3 of them, but he's made so many great films.
He's a really versatile actor, but I don't think he's ever done something quite as against type as this movie. I can't think of another example where he is really stretching himself and nailing it.
Apparently he and Gilroy had a lot of fun making this. They were laughing constantly when they weren't actually filming. When they're leaving the crime scene, he and Rick running down the driveway as the cops are coming, and he's talking about things like you have to meet your goals and all this kind of stuff. They're running away from a triple murder, which wasn't their fault, but still they're involved. Certainly Lou is involved in that. And he's talking about things like that, so I can see why they'd be laughing.
But when he's recording that footage, he's not thinking, oh my God, I'm in danger. I think the danger thrills him. Oh my God, these people just got killed in front of me. He's not thinking about the tragedy of it all. He's got that camera in his hand, and all that's going through his brain is, this is going to make me rich. This is going to do so much to help me reach my goals. So when he's running away, that's what he's saying to Rick. That's because that's what he was thinking about the whole time.
No, I know. It's just funny that he's doing that, considering the circumstances.
Definitely funny. Yeah.
It's also interesting, too, when the newsman says during the show, our freelance videographer, what do they call him? The video production news, that he's insisting now it's got to be called video production news. I don't think they say Lou Bloom's name whenever they say video production news on air constantly in that morning. But I love when that guy says about how he went in there to try to help out. He heard there was trouble in there. He didn't do that at all. Oh, yeah. But that's what's great about that footage. Those two, I think they're real anchors. There are actual real anchors in this in some of the briefer scenes. Whatever they are, real people or not. They do the thing I find so annoying, and I've watched news now for 26 years. It's all I've really done at the CBC. The speculation. It's bad in this case, more so, I guess, than I'm used to seeing in the big national scene that I deal with. But all the speculation, well, obviously that's the murder weapon on the front step. Yeah, probably is. You don't know that. He went in there to try to help. Where are you coming up with that from? And, of course, Rene Russo's in their ear the whole time. Hit that again. And then you see a few seconds later, it's like that broadcast news scene. I say it here, it comes out there.
It was kind of one of those moments that came and went for me, but it is important that they show the anchors sanitizing the moment for us. We, when we're there with Lou, were disgusted by his behavior, but when you later see it as it's broadcast with these anchors talking over it, giving you rationalizations, he went in to help, or even just their commentary that expresses empathy for the victims always. Yeah. Earlier when he's in the house and he's shooting them from the kitchen, he shows the bullet holes. For the drive-by shooting, there's the bullet holes in the fridge.
Earlier scene.
The anchors are expressing all this sympathy for the family. Oh, how scary that must be. And it's that commentary that allows the viewers at home to never reflect on where the footage came from, never reflect on the immorality or the ethical gray area of how they actually acquire this footage that we all like to see. The way they shoot the triple homicide, and when I say the way they shoot, I mean the way Lou shoots and the way we're watching the footage, it's so well done because there's these tracking shots that are going around corners and you see through the corner of your eye, who's that in that bed? And you want to know as a viewer. And as he gets closer, you finally get a better look at what's happening there and you're grateful to have your curiosity satisfied, but then you're at the same time repulsed by what Lou is doing, and it brings home our own culpability.
You're part of the problem by watching this.
Yeah. We let the anchor, who has nothing to do with anything that's happening, solve our feelings so that we can get that vicarious thrill of watching a train wreck. You can't look away. You have this morbid curiosity about it, but you can dress it up and, oh, empathy, oh, heavens me, I can't believe this happened. We've got to do something about this. But the truth is we tune into the news because we want to see the bloody bodies, right?
Well, let me tell the story I've told before. It really applies to this. Peter Mansbridge, the former host of The National, retired quite a few years ago. He did some kind of question and answer thing. I think it was on the National, but it may have been a separate show. Anyway, say the guy's name is Stan. Stan asks, I've heard that phrase, if it bleeds, it leads, which is in this movie. Well, Stan, that's not true. And they went on this whole thing. And I remember hearing that in the moment then, many years ago, and thinking that is so untrue.
And you're the one watching the news every day, helping make the news every day.
Now, the National for the CBC and any big national program probably doesn't lead with a story like this, a triple homicide, that does later on have drugs be part of it too. That's why they were killed. Doesn't make it okay, obviously, that they went in there and shot these people, but it wasn't just a random killing of rich people. They went in there because of a drug thing, and Rene Russo doesn't want that to get out. But when Mansbridge said that, I thought, great example of this is, let's not dwell on this for more than a few seconds, but Donald Trump. Why does a Canadian company focus on him so much when he's not even the president anymore when he speaks? We shouldn't be showing that stuff, and it's because he's ratings. It certainly is for the Americans, and it is for us too.
We're coming at this as Canadians. As I understand, I've known people who've spent time in America, and they say watching the news there is just a sea change. It's completely different, and they do focus way more on violence and fear and stoking
That's
up.
a big part of it, right?
Yeah. And
they're still on the loose. Those guys are out there. They're coming for you, too.
Not that we are never guilty of that up here in Canada. I think even Michael Moore, was it Bowling for Columbine, where he spends time in Canada? I think it's even in Toronto, and he watches the news, and he's like, this is remarkably different. They're not stoking fear every night. I'm not trying to be smug about it.
We're not perfect, but we're better.
Yeah.
A key element of this with Gilroy is casting Bill Paxton and his wife, Rene Russo, in two of the other key roles. Obviously, Riz Ahmed's maybe the second lead, but he wasn't that well known at the time. And Paxton and Russo are probably still a bigger name than he is even to this point. So Paxton's character is a vulture, too. He just doesn't do what Lou does. At least we don't see it on the screen.
Yeah, we don't see what he does. I'm sure he's no angel.
He's not a young man. He may have done some of this stuff 20 years ago. And Rene Russo is desperate. When Lou blackmails her for sex, he says something about how you're the lowest ranked news station and you're on the graveyard shift. And it is working for the morning. It's not like maybe they do air something like this at 4 a.m. We don't. The CBC wouldn't do this because we don't have the staff yet. That changed a long time ago when it came to budget cuts. But the footage probably usually airs at 6 a.m. They talk about that at one point. The Ted guy from Mad Men, Kevin Rom, so Ted from Mad Men, is the voice of reason in some ways, but he never actually stops her from airing this kind of stuff. But I think it's him that points out, people are eating breakfast right now, we're showing bloody footage, not even that shooting. We stopped the movie with maybe an hour to go, and I thought, I love the movie. It's a great film. It's a full 2 hours. But what is there to show that's another hour of this? I forgot how much involved we do get with that triple homicide during it, that night, the aftermath, and of course when he sets it up at the end, so the cops will come to that public place, that Chinese food restaurant. That was going to be my nutshell, by the way. People are just enjoying a Chinese food meal, including 2 criminals.
Succulent Chinese meal?
Right, succulent. And an unethical newsman, meaning Gyllenhaal's character, ruins it all by getting the cops to come at that point. But Nina, Russo's character, and Paxton's character, they're better than Lou, but not by that much.
Yeah. A good companion to this movie would be Network. We never really see the people who run the station, who employ Nina. But there's this total amorality of the people up top that care more about ratings and influence. Let's be real. I don't even think it's just ratings. I think that most news stations are run by 5 billionaires or something, and I'm sure that influence means probably as much to them as any pittance of money that you get from a news station these days. But at any rate, let's just say it's about money, because I think that's what this film is trying to get at. Nina's not the one actually making decisions. When she is making these very morally gray decisions about what to put on the air and what not, and you have Frank, I think his name is, Kevin Rom, in her ear saying, this is wrong. Well, he clearly isn't the one calling the shots because she goes over his head all the time. And you do get the impression, especially by the end of the movie, that her bosses are pretty happy with what's happening here, that she's been making some right decisions and that she's been rewarded for some pretty shady methods. She did something I think you and I would both find completely repulsive, which is that she goes to bed with Lou, the most off-putting person. It's funny because Gyllenhaal is one of my Hollywood crushes.
He looks terrible in this movie.
I love him. He looks terrible in this movie. I see that scene where he's propositioning her. He's basically blackmailing her into going to bed with him. And I am so repulsed. I'm like, she can't do it. She can't do it. You would go to bed with him?
No,
for your job?
No, but we've talked about this before in other podcasts, so here we go again. When people do that, how could you have sex with somebody for money or for a job? It's the way of the world. How is it that different to sell your body as a baseball player, to sell your body as a guy who works...
I'm not judging her. She's got her back up against the wall. It's an excellent script, and it has more than one little throwaway lines that it can tell you so much about a character. And one of the things he says when he is blackmailing her, well, first he says, you can learn a lot about somebody online, revealing that he has looked her up and probably knows a lot about her. And he says, you could lose your job and your health insurance. She could get a job somewhere. But obviously what's important to her is her health insurance. So her life could actually depend on this job.
Or maybe somebody in her family.
Or maybe somebody in her family,
covered,
sure.
Yeah.
But that is such a threat that you can only really make in America.
Right.
That wouldn't work so much up here in Canada, but that threat could be very real to her. And I was thinking later that in a way, she has a boss, and she is her boss's Rick. He hired Rick because Rick was desperate, and he knew Rick would do anything to keep that job. And she was hired by somebody who may or may not know she's desperate, but I think in some way, like everybody working in America, even if you're middle class, there's this desperate fear of losing your job, especially when it's combined with health insurance. Yeah. So she's just as much a slave to her employer in that way, or she's just as blackmailed by her employer as Rick is blackmailed and owned by Lou.
She also didn't choose night shifts. I chose night shifts a long time ago. I don't know if I want to do them anymore, if I really wanted to then. But I've talked about it lots of times with people I know, including you. You're still in night shifts. You're 50 years old. It works better for me in the job I have than the other people that work a rotation of sorts and having to work till 11 p.m. or start at 7 a.m. This works better for my life, and that's one reason why I chose it. She's not choosing this. She wants to move on to other things. And she probably will. When this movie is over, there's a good chance she's going to because of the footage they got with that shootout. That is obviously morally terrible what he does, and people get killed, not just that cop, but I think other people are shot in that Chinese food place. Mm-hmm. So it's morally terrible. But he does get incredible footage, obviously. Rick shooting it. They show some of it briefly. It wouldn't have been perfect, but it is great footage. Now, we got the DVD from the Toronto Public Library, and it doesn't look all that good. Of course, free viewing, and it worked fine for once. DVDs from there are crapshoot a lot of the time. I think people mess with them, scratch them or what have you. And you said it didn't look good, and you're right, but I think it's also, in a lot of ways, going for that Michael Mann in Heat, but especially in Collateral look. This movie has a lot in common with Collateral. So I think it's supposed to look like that. They're set in L.A. as well. It's funny how in both movies, they're fiction in both cases. They're entirely made-up stories. But when they are driving around in Collateral and in Nightcrawler, Los Angeles is so not busy. It's surprising how few people are on the street through most of these movies. Depends on the night when you drive downtown Toronto. It could be quite busy. Now, I guess it could be 2, 3 in the morning. I don't drive around that time of night. I'd get there around 10:30. But it's just funny to see Los Angeles being not deserted, but not that busy. Mm-hmm. And multiple Hollywood movies have depicted that. These people know their city, so they're probably right.
It's a very Los Angeles film. It's kind of a neo-noir, right?
Yeah, it's listed that way on Wikipedia.
Oh, it is? Okay. It has that vibe, that soulless pessimism.
Well, also, he's an anti-hero. I know you think he's a villain, and he is in our story. But he's like Travis Bickle is, because he's the person we follow. They do terrible things. More so, actually, probably Lou, even though Travis kills people. But he does kill terrible people. This guy gets people killed. That's not good. Okay, anyway.
And Rick is a good person. He gets Rick very much killed.
Right. But we also are following this guy the whole movie. So either you try to enjoy that for 2 hours, or you're going to be judging the whole time, and then why watch the movie at all? So that's why he's an anti-hero, not a pure villain.
But he's the purest anti-hero.
Yeah.
We talk about Walter White being an anti-hero, but you love Walter White. And I think that the show loved Walter White and wanted you to love him and root for him, even though he does bad things, but you're still like, but he's my guy.
Skyler was the villain in that show.
Yes, but at no point are
Which is unfair.
Of course. But at no point are you like, lose my guy. Mm-hmm. You're just as skeezed out by him as everybody else in the movie. And this is where Gyllenhaal's performance is outstanding. He's clearly antisocial personality, which is just a DSM version of saying that he's a psychopath. But he doesn't seem to have violent...
What's DSM mean again?
Oh, no. I don't know what it's... It's like what psychologists use to diagnose.
Oh, okay.
It's like calling someone a psychopath. But he's not like a violent psychopath. He's just somebody who's incapable of remorse.
He is at least once. He beats up that security guard.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
He probably doesn't kill him, because if he killed him, I think they would have been able to track down who did it.
But I think he also is meant to be...
one more thing, he never seems worried that they'll find him.
He does have emotional outbursts from time to time.
That great scene in the bathroom when he breaks the mirror.
Yeah, but it's almost surprising to see him have a moment of genuine emotion at any time, because it's not just a veneer that he puts on for other people. You see him in his apartment practicing being a real person, laughing at things on the television. And
it's a funny movie. It's a Danny Kaye movie from many decades ago, but it's a guy getting his head cut off. Do you notice that's what they chose to show? Which was funny in the context, granted, but that's what makes him laugh.
But even in that moment, he just doesn't let his guard down.
Right, and he should, but he's completely alone. All he has is a plant.
Because that's truly who he is. There's no real personality underneath the veneer that he's putting up for everybody. How old was Gyllenhaal when he made this? I think he's about my age, so he would have been in his mid-30s, and then losing all that weight made him look even older. Yeah. But yet he seems like he was born yesterday. He actually does seem like an alien in a person suit. He spent his whole life in Los Angeles, and yet he seems to have this almost guileless lack of understanding about human nature. What happened in his life to lead up to that moment where he's stealing scrap metal at the beginning of the film? How could he have just emerged and know so little about humanity as if he just learned it all from books? In a way, the movie almost takes place in an elevated reality. You're not really invited to think too hard about it. I'm glad that they never tell us about his past. I don't want to know. I like this version of him as like a vehicle for examining the relationship between ourselves and the media.
And capitalism as well, and morality.
Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, he's like a perfect capitalist, too, right?
So he was born in December 1980.
Oh, so he's 2 years younger than me.
Right. He was 33, 34 when they shot this, give or take, I guess. I mentioned Taxi Driver, Travis Bickle, a few minutes ago. I think it's the commentary where the guy points out, is he lying about being a Vietnam veteran? Yes, he has the jacket that says his name on it, but he could have ginned that up. He could have also taken somebody's name, like Dick in Mad Men becomes, what's his name? Don
Draper, yeah.
Right. So that's possible in Taxi Driver that critic is right, that he's not really what he said he was, and we never find out where this guy came from and why he's the way he is. Did you notice every time we see Lou's apartment, the bed is always made? I think much like Travis and many other characters in movies, he doesn't sleep, which is part of the why he's so insane. He never seems to eat. And Gyllenhaal wasn't eating so he could lose weight for the character. He eats chicken in that one scene with Nina, I guess, and that's the one time we see him ever actually consuming food in this movie. Maybe he drinks liquids here and there. Yeah, he supposedly eats with Rick a few times, but we don't see him doing that. So he's not even really being a human being in any way. But when he's on his own, you think that's when he can finally do that. But all he ever does is watch television. He loves when he sees his footage on all the stations, on the morning shows, and he saves all of his stuff. Okay, that's his job. But I think that's all he's doing. Okay, once in a while he sleeps with Nina. It's more than once. I'm surprised that he even wants that. He seems so inhuman. Travis doesn't seem to ever want to have sex with anybody. He wants to save the teenage prostitute, not sleep with her. Yeah, he wants to date Betsy, but he deliberately ruins that. I didn't realize I was going to talk about Taxi Driver so much today, but these characters have so much in common.
Yeah.
And part of it is they get two great actors and two outstanding roles, two of their better roles in each case, and yet we don't really know that much about them. The great actors and the great directors make us love the films that are about awful people, but not even awful people where there's a lot of layers to peel back, or if there are, we don't get them peeled back. And we should be almost bothered by that. Well, why don't we know more about Lou and about Travis? I don't want to.
Travis maybe has a little bit of redeemability in the way that Lou has. Absolutely.
Yeah, Travis does save
none.
a kid.
Every time you, as a viewer, think you might be latching on to some kind of sympathetic interpretation of his character and his goals in life, the movie tears that rug right out from under you. And I think that Rick, as a character, he serves several purposes. Riz Ahmed is wonderful in this movie. He's this voice of reason and this conscience who's the failed Jiminy Cricket on his shoulder being like, should we be doing this? Isn't this illegal? Isn't this crazy? Isn't this dangerous? And Lou doesn't listen to him because he absolutely doesn't have to, but it's a great way to communicate to the audience. Yeah, this is illegal. Yeah, this is dangerous. Yeah, this is completely unethical and immoral. So it's just like a good reminder to the audience. Don't get caught up, because I know it's our instinct when you're following a character around to just start rooting for them. You can't help yourself. But the movie seems to be aggressively, persistently reminding us that he is vile. And yet you're still caught up in the film, probably because it just is so watchable and fun. It really is a fun movie. That last 30 minutes, edge of your seat, one of the best car chases.
Ironically.
Incredible car chase.
French Connection, Bullet, this is on that list.
Oh, yeah. You don't even really understand what's happening at that point either. You watch it second, third time like you and I have, and then you know exactly what he's getting at. I wouldn't say that Lou has an arc. He doesn't have an emotional arc.
He never changes.
No, he
gets worse.
A success arc. It's true, he gets worse, if anything, but he has an arc as going from somebody who's a total failure at the beginning to somebody who's incredibly successful by the end.
One reason why he's probably worse is because he's enabled.
He has that speech near the middle of the movie where he says, I think I finally discovered the thing that I love doing and I'm good at.
Yeah.
Oh, finally somewhere where my complete lack of ethics, sense of personal safety or anything fit right in. It's a huge asset to be a psychopath in this job.
The most moral person that's ever done this before is being asked by the nature of the job to get a close shot, as close as they reasonably can, of somebody who's hurt or dead.
Yeah. It's not going to help the family. It's not going to help the victim. In fact, if anything, it's going to hurt the public because it's used to gin up fear.
Yeah.
To get ratings and make people behave in a certain way, to manipulate
Especially
everyone.
if they have different colored skin than you and I.
They are not ambiguous about the straight-up racism in this film, where she says to him, I want you to find victims that are white, wealthier the better, good neighborhood. A carjacking in this crummy neighborhood, that's not news. She has this amazing line, I'll probably butcher it, but she says, when you think about our station, imagine a woman screaming, running down the street or something, bloody with her throat slit or something. That's the image I want you to conjure when you think of what I want you to bring me.
Yeah, she wants graphic footage. I think she says that to him literally the first night they meet, or one of the first times.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the second time.
She's like Faye Dunaway's character in Network in that she doesn't let morality cloud her performance at work. She's been doing it long enough. I'm not going to mince words. Why would I? Why would I pretend I'm doing something I'm not? We're here to get a job done, and me trying to be cagey about what I need from you is not going to help anybody. Her and Ahmed and Gyllenhaal, the three of them. Bill Paxton is great too. He has a fairly small part. It's just mostly fun to see him. But
goes against his type a little bit because he's playing not a villain like he does in Frailty. Although he's an understandable villain in that movie, and not a complete nice guy like you often play, because he's such a great guy in reality. It's such a shame we lost him so many years ago. He's been dead for, I think, 7 years now.
Real tragedy, because he's still doing great work. He had just been cast in a network show.
But speaking to him, when he first offers Lou, or the only time he offers Lou a job, and Lou flatly keeps on telling him, no, I don't want your job. That's also the first time we hear anybody say night crawling. I've been night crawling for whatever it is, 10 or 15 years, is what Loader says. I think I know the answer to this, but why do you think Lou turns him down so flat? Because they could be a pretty good team together. Lou knows I'm going to do better without you. Is that the answer? Why? Yeah. Financially. And I'll be constrained by your morals, because he probably has some, certainly more than Lou does.
Yeah, he doesn't need a boss. He doesn't want a partner. He definitely doesn't want anybody telling him what to do. He's trying to present it like it's this big opportunity. Hey, you and me can team up and we'll own this city. But the truth is he's only offering him a job because he's beating him. He doesn't take him seriously at first. He treats him,
Get a better camera.
Yeah. But now this guy is eating his lunch, and that's the only reason
he
approaches him. Exactly. If you can't beat him, join him. He wants to buy him out. He's not a good guy either, so who knows what he really means by this partnership. I think he's probably trying to take advantage of him in a way, but it's also an act of desperation. They kind of have this little back and forth for a while because Lou's beating him, and then he turns down his job and insults him too. He threatens him. You were making me want to grab your face and knee you in the knee or something. I can't remember.
Who's the he that does that? Is it Paxton?
Lou eventually threatens Paxton because
okay. Right, yes.
He won't take no for an answer. And then I think the next time we see them together is when it's Paxton who's beat him to a scene. He gets the plane crash. And
Rick messes up the directions. That's part of the reason why.
Right. And then Nina is furious with him and he feels like he's losing his grip. So then what does he do? He doesn't try to join forces with Loader. He cuts his brakes and then gets footage of the accident. And again, you have Rick, the little failed Jiminy Cricket, being like, hey, cut that
He's one of our guys.
He's one of us. You shouldn't be doing that. I love that. It's completely meaningless. He's not hearing him at all. He could care less. Loader's approach to competition is to join forces, and Lou's approach to competition
take him out of the equation.
Is to get him nearly killed.
Yeah, he's badly hurt for sure. It's the last time we see Paxton in the movie, and the look on his face says, I'm going to get you for this, or what have you, but the movie ends before we ever see him come back. Maybe that's one of those things at the end of the movie we could say, what happens next? Months down the road, Loader recovers, and he's coming for him. I'm cutting your brakes.
Nightcrawler 2. How different would Nightcrawler look if it was made today? 2014 is such a specific time where you have cell phones and smartphones, obviously, but it didn't feel like that camera in your hand had the total ubiquity that it does now, where it would just be a completely different story. I don't even know if this would be a viable job anymore because there's just too many people in public that have phones in their hands that could get the footage and send it to the news station or put it on social media. If you were going to make this movie now, would Joe actually be trying to make a social media channel on his own rather than using the news as his method for getting his footage out? even the political landscape, a lot of the stuff that Nina says as a character, she would have to word completely differently now. We talk about how she just cuts to the chase and she doesn't BS people, but she could never get away with talking that way in a newsroom in 2024 the way she does in 2014.
I bet they still do sometimes.
I bet they still do.
Especially do at 3 o'clock in the morning at a scummier news station than a big one. By the way, I think one of the reasons also that Gyllenhaal, being 30-something years old, turns down the Paxton character, who's probably 20 years older than him, maybe more, is, what do you know, old man? It's never said out loud, but I bet that's subtext too. I know more than you now because I'm the new breed and you're old school. One angle we can't forget about, of course, is the cops. Michael Hyatt and Price Carson play Frontieri and Lieberman, the detectives. Michael Hyatt, the woman, the black woman, has more screen time than he does. She's the main one. She's the driving force. She's another person that's very direct and to the point in this movie. She's on to Lou, of course. The first time she doesn't know anything. She doesn't know that he recorded the actual murder and cut it out. Who would know that? But then she seems to realize that he must know about these things because why did he know to go and find these dudes and then set them up that way? Nobody knows other than the now dead Rick that that's what Lou did, these set up. And they are killers and they deserve to be put in jail, if not killed the way they both are that night by the cops. But she's a detective, so she's got intuition, and she knows the truth. But a very key thing here, and I'm glad that he does get away with it and she has nothing. I'm only glad it's good for story in a movie like this. I don't want this to actually be true because Lou does belong in jail for many reasons in this movie. But she doesn't have proof. She's right, but she can't prove it.
You say she has good instinct, but I feel like everybody sees right through him. She knows he's lying. She knows he's full of it. He has that weird way of speaking that seems like it's rehearsed all the time. He's just not quite a good enough actor to pull off normal human being.
You're right. A good actor plays a bad actor.
Yeah. He's a performer playing someone who's performing. He isn't pulling it off. He just can't be natural. So he has all these lies locked and loaded to say to her when they're sitting down. He sticks to his story. I think they probably thought they would just have a chance to gather more evidence and maybe press charges on him. And maybe they still will, although it's implied that he gets away with it. I don't know if I believe that. I think the cops would mess with him. He would get in trouble.
In some way?
Well, there's another line that Loader says when he's trying to convince him to join forces. I can help you out because I have all these great connections with the cops. I play nice with the cops. That's how he gets his way.
To look the other way.
I'm sure that he's bribing them. I'm sure that they have reciprocal relationship. And I certainly am not under the impression that the LAPD is uncorruptible. Neither is anybody else in the world who wasn't born yesterday. Detective Frontieri seems to be an honest cop who wants to get to the bottom of things. But he doesn't even seem to want to try to cooperate with her or get in good with any of the cops. So it feels like he would eventually get taken down by them if he's not cooperating.
Yeah, at the end he has 2 vans and a staff of 3. And I also noted to you when we watched the film that he's now a passenger. He was always the driver with Rick. Never once is Rick driving the old car or that really cool red car he has, which does stand out. Rick points out.
It was a Dodge Challenger. I looked up because I thought it was a Mustang. Our friend of ours has the exact same car. Well, not the exact same. Because
not red.
Not red with a big racing stripe. Somebody who seems to live this really Spartan lifestyle with only one goal in mind, and that is to take over the world of night crawling. Why buy a flashy car? I know why he would buy a fast car. Yeah. But why buy a flashy car?
I think it's similar to our friend Carl. It's because he wants it.
Because he wants it.
He indulges sex with Nina, which seems weird for him to do with anybody. And he indulges his desire to have a car like that. And that's about all.
Yeah. And we both agreed that the pleasure he takes from sex with Nina probably has way more to do with knowing that she has to do it. It's like a control thing for him. He seems to here and there get off on his manipulation, forcing people into situations that they don't like. He likes that feeling of being in control.
Look at that line he says to her about how I want you to do something, not the way you were last night.
When we're alone in your apartment, I don't want you pushing back on me. I don't want this anymore.
Could be something odd in bed, if you will.
Well, obviously. He asked her to do something, and she was like, no, that's too much. And he's like, no, it's not.
Probably not straight intercourse.
I'd rather not think about it because he's just so repellent.
And it is funny that Gyllenhaal, of all people, you're saying that about because he is one of your crushes.
He is in my top 5. I love him.
And he's a funny guy in reality. He's great on talk shows. He's been in so many good movies. He's such a likable actor. I always remember that thing in Family Guy. One of their asides was the 2 Gyllenhaal sitting there, Jake and Maggie. And the thing was something about how we ruin every movie we're in. And they do it very mondo. We ruin every movie we're in. I know. And it was a bit of a funny thing, I thought. But even then, that was a long time ago, I thought, why are you ripping on the Gyllenhaals? What have they done? And since then, they've both done even more great work. They're very talented people.
I know, and really lovable, too. Really likable actors.
They both came
tons
from
of
Hollywood
charisma.
royalty. They got in the business partly, at least, because of their dad, Stephen, but they deserved to be in the business. They're the Fondas and the Douglases, Michael Douglas, Jane Fonda, Peter Fonda. People that were good beyond the fact that their dad or mother or both helped them get in the business. Margaret Qualley now is a good example, too. Yeah. Andy McDowell's daughter.
And when I was looking him up, I forgot that he started acting when he was so young. He played one of the kids in City Slickers or City Slickers 2.
Yeah, he's Billy Crystal's son.
Yeah, okay.
The first one, yeah.
Yeah, so he was working since he was really little.
He was probably 10 or so when they shot the movie. Mm-hmm. Well, we've only covered him 3 times, though. Donnie Darko, and like I said, when we covered that movie, the review at the time, when I wrote reviews, that got me the most emails, by far. And of course, Brokeback Mountain, we covered that, too. Is he on the spectrum? The fact that he really can't connect with people and his way of speaking, of course. So many things about a business course I took. He's just repeating verbatim, it seems like, what they said. To learn from that is important, and to take phrases from that is important, I guess. But he just seems to be talking just like them, which means that's not a normal human thing to do.
Most psychopaths are good at impersonating a normal person, and he's so bad at it. So I think it's supposed to be this combination of the two things, because he doesn't care about people, but he doesn't have the skills to fit in.
Travis Bickle-esque.
Yeah, Travis Bickle is such a good comparison.
And I don't think he's sleeping almost at all. Riz Ahmed, we haven't covered him until now, but we love The Sound of Metal, or just Sound of Metal, not The Sound of Metal. And he won an Oscar. I think he's the only person in the cast, at least the major cast members, that has won an Oscar before. But it wasn't for acting, it was for live action short, The Long Goodbye, which I think was during one of the pandemic Oscars, maybe the 2021 Oscars. Rene Russo, who is Gilroy's wife and is also Thor's mom. She does play Frigga, I think is her name, in the Thor and Avengers movies. She's never been covered by us before, I don't believe, but I've covered her 3 times in the other podcast I did with Chris, Scoring at the Movies. She was in Major League 1 and 2, and also Tin Cup. Bill Paxton, we've covered, I think it's 6 times now. He's got a brief role in The Terminator. Wait, we haven't covered that yet, but I'm going too soon, so I guess I shouldn't count that. He's in Apollo 13, Titanic, A Simple Plan. He is terrific in that. I still think his best performance of all time, although Frailty is a great one for him, too. And he's got that fairly small role in Edge of Tomorrow, Live, Die, Repeat. Kevin Rahm, Frank, you're right, that's his name in this. He was Ted on Mad Men. He does a lot of TV. And Ann Cusack is one of the other fairly major players in this. She's the boss or has some kind of legal role, what have you, because she's consulted by Russo and Rahm, Frank and Nina, about some things here and there. Anyway, she's one of the Cusacks. Her debut is A League of Their Own, and she's Donna January in The Boys, so she's Annie January's mom. Dan Gilroy wrote and directed this. It was his directorial debut. He'd been writing for quite a while. The other 2 movies, I didn't like them that much, but Roman J. Israel, Esquire, got Denzel an Oscar nomination, which I don't think was deserved. I did not like that movie. Velvet Buzzsaw, Gyllenhaal is in that. I saw it, don't remember it all that well. I guess it was okay at best. So this is easily the best movie of his 3 so far. He wrote The Bourne Legacy and Kong Skull Island, some other things, plus also episodes of Andor, which I believe his brother Tony is the executive producer on.
Yeah.
And Tony was a producer on this, too, along with Gyllenhaal and 10 people in total. The movie's 2, 3, 5 to 1. We watched the not-so-great DVD from the Toronto Public Library, but I do think that was partly intentional, at least. I haven't seen this in a long time, so maybe it looks pretty crappy even if you get a Blu-ray or something like that. Cinematographer Robert Elswit worked on Boogie Nights. He won an Oscar for PTA's There Will Be Blood. He also shot Red Belt and King Richard, which I covered with Chris on Scoring at the Movies. The cutter, another Gilroy, John Gilroy, who always edits his brother's films, the 3 of them so far, but also cut Miracle and Warrior, movies I covered on Scoring at the Movies with Chris. And then James Newton Howard composed this. He's been nominated for Oscars 9 times. 9 times. 9 times. But has never won. He's composed for Major League, Pretty Woman, The Fugitive, Space Jam, The Dark Knight, and The Sixth Sense, and other Shyamalans for that matter. And all those movies I just mentioned were covered in one way or another, Scoring at the Movies, or our podcast. So it's Major League and Space Jam, I guess, are the ones from Scoring at the Movies.
The score is a bit of a point of contention with some people, because it is this traditional Hollywood score that seems to be treating the film as if it's
classier than it really is?
Yeah, I guess so. The idea is the score is reflecting only Lou's state of mind, and in Lou's state of mind, he's the hero. So, to me, it worked amazingly, and you know how finicky I am about scores, so that's my opinion on it.
Because there's a counterpoint in this case.
Yeah. In a way, it's being used as a tool and not just telling the audience how to feel. The audience is uncomfortable with how the movie's making them feel, and that disparate score is adding to that. I mean, I love the movie so much. I just love every choice he makes. I think it has such a consistent tone and such a great, unique, and powerful vision.
The film was on a lot of people's top 10 lists that year. I had it 10th. So obviously I loved it then and still do now. What happens next? I don't know. Maybe brutal car accidents, deadly home invasions, and random shootings happen during the day sometimes. I know his job is night crawling, but there has to be some footage you can get at other times of day. Then again, he never seems to sleep, and yes, you're going to get more intense footage at night, so what do I know? The other thing that happens next is that Lou gets to be the most successful news gatherer in LA, or he ends up in jail for any number of legitimate reasons. He belongs in jail many times over.
Or he's the CEO of the TV station.
Well, you can believe that. One of the things he demands from Nino when he gets that footage of the shootout, not the shootout, I guess, but the triple homicide, is he wants video production news mentioned, which the guy does, and the woman does too, many times during the morning footage there. But also he wants to meet important people, and yeah, you're right, he could end up being very important very fast.
If he had charm to go along with that antisocial personality, he would run the station.
He'd be very important.
His charisma is the only thing holding him back.
You mentioned a minute ago about the score, almost suggesting class that the movie doesn't... Obviously, Gilroy knows this, the movie doesn't have. Let's not forget those two anchors we see for so much of that one scene especially. She's a beautiful Asian woman. He's an okay-looking older guy, pretty good-looking older guy. Of course, wearing a suit. She looks good. These people almost should be wearing hoodies, and they should be dirty when they cover stuff like this. But every news person, especially if it's a guy, is going to wear a suit, and every woman dresses classily at the very least. We're talking about, oh, this terrible stuff, and death and destruction, and blood is everywhere. But we look so good, don't we?
Yeah, it's such a great observation. This is how thoughtful this movie is. It gets you to come to these conclusions without ever really saying it out loud. It's such an outstanding script, and the direction pulls off every point perfectly.
I like when he meets them, too, later on. The guy remembers his name. Lou, right? Video production news. And that's one of the scenes where Gyllenhaal's eyes are bigger than yours. They're so huge. So he says, yeah, that's it. And the regular Jake Gyllenhaal could sell that as being a really charming thing. Oh, yeah, we're making a connection. But the look on Lou's face and those huge eyes is more about, yes, I should be connecting with you right now. This should be a humorous moment, but I don't know how to do that.
He's a little starstruck by them. And there's a callback. Earlier in the film, he talks about how, because he's so observant, you only see him do two things when he's with other people, and that's either observing them intensely or spewing out some rehearsed bit of BS. But earlier in the film, he says something about how the male anchor wears that tie on Fridays. And then when he sees him, he jokes, it must be Friday. You're wearing that tie. And they're like, Lou. He practiced. He thought about what to say. And then he has an opportunity to say it later to cement these relationships. Maybe he's getting better at this.
Yeah, becoming more of a human being. Much like in Under the Skin. She becomes more human as it goes along, even though she's never human. Okay, an excellent film. Glad we covered it the day before October, which will be Scary Movie Month. But your last thoughts on Nightcrawler?
I mean, I love a cutthroat film. It's almost too much, but it really manages that delicate balance of a gripping story with an intensely off-putting lead character. So many things to recommend about it, but you really need to watch it just for Gyllenhaal's performance alone.
The other actors are good, but you're right about that. It's also very funny a lot of the time, the way he talks. And if this guy is in any way the American dream, maybe that's one reason America is as screwed up as it is.
Well, I think that's their point.
Right. In any case, it's a terrific film about a terrible person. Terrible people. It's not like Paxton or Russo's characters are upstanding citizens either. They'll do anything to make a buck, just not as much as Gyllenhaal would. They won't cross those lines. Or maybe they would have. Well, probably not. It's really him that does that.
They just didn't read those great self-help books that he read.
So that was how we saw Nightcrawler. We'll be back in 7 days, and by then it will be Scary Movie Month. It won't be the first posting in October. That will be my solo review of Bob Clark's Black Christmas that goes up on Friday, October 4th, so the end of this week. But the flick we'll be chatting about on October 7th will be the great Zom rom-com, Shaun of the Dead. So as always, the coming attractions trivia questions is for the next episode we do together, not Friday's show, so Shaun of the Dead. Bev's got some gas over there. Which is this? Edgar Wright hasn't directed a movie since Last Night in Soho 3 years ago. He has something in the works, though, and it's a remake of which 1980s action film? Easy to find. Might provide a bit of a discussion. A bit of a strange choice, I think, too, for him to do.
All right, so for the answer to that question, check out next week's podcast about Shaun of the Dead. You already know how to find us, but let me remind you to favorite or subscribe wherever you listen, which is also where you can find our archive of hundreds of episodes that are available for free. While you're there, leave us a rating and a review. It's a great way to support the podcast. We're both on Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51, or you can reach us by email, haveyouveurseenpodcast@gmail.com. And you can find our podcast on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And to enjoy freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you in Canada or the US, please go to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and enjoy a 20% discount.
Before we go, I should probably mention the names. We talked about them so often, those two anchors. KWLA anchor Ben Waterman is Rick Chambers. Chambers plays him. And Holly Hanula, I guess how you say that, is Lisa May. So they're the two.
They are real anchors then?
No, there must be actors. Rick Chambers plays Ben Waterman. Sharon Tay and Rick Garcia play Sharon Tay and Rick Garcia. They must be real anchors. But I guess these two are actors. To end it, as you prepare to say cut, remember, steady hands.
And